Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Bull Take Scouting Podcast. For the first time today, we're going to be talking the actual picks of the 2023 NFL Draft. We talked about a good amount of the prospects in our Senior Bowl review. Obviously, we'll be getting over a lot of the other prospects, especially some of these first rounders in future episodes. But today, let's dive into this draft order, specifically these top 10 picks, and go through each of them, discussing what we think that teams will do and what we would do if we were in their place. So, Alex, do you want to start it off? The first pick, the Chicago Bears. There's a lot of trade talk surrounding this pick. What do you make of it?
Yeah, so I think we're hearing kind of both sides of the coin with the Bears in the first overall pick. There's a lot of people that think they should and think they will end up trading the first overall pick to a quarterback needy team. We'll talk about a couple of those in a few minutes. There's also been some noise about the Bears potentially trading Justin Fields. The Bears obviously would stick at that first overall pick, trade Justin Fields, and probably end up taking what seems like Bryce Young at this point is seems to be the QB1 for most people in draft circles. But there's kind of two camps: trade out of the first overall pick or trade Justin Fields and take a quarterback. Let's talk about the latter for a second. Do we think that will happen? They'll trade Justin Fields, and do we think they should?
I think they're absolutely not trading Justin Fields. The people that have been saying that are not really the most plugged in, reliable sources. If you look at the guys that the two of us have learned year in, year out are really reliable, Dane Bruglers, Daniel Jeremiah's, Lance Zierleins, Tony Paulines of the NFL draft community, none of them have said that, and they're fully expecting the Bears to trade out. And it makes sense. I don't think at this point, 2 years into Justin Fields' time with the Bears, and after a step forward in his second season, they're going to be tossing him out the door and parting with that possibility at the quarterback position. I don't see it happening.
Yeah, I don't either. I think the noise is kind of been put out there to make teams second guess the fact that, oh, maybe the Bears are looking at a quarterback, so let's offer them even more for that first overall pick. To me, that just seems like um, what's going on with the Bears. Do I think they should do that? Not 100% sure, but I definitely would consider it. I think you have to do your full analysis of the quarterbacks, which, you know, I don't think you should have come to a full decision yet on what you think of the quarterbacks. I think there's still a lot of things to go through: interviews, combine, measurements, medicals, so much stuff that you still need to find out before you come to a conclusion on all these guys. We did see Justin Fields take a step forwards, especially in the run game. His ability, as a rusher, he can show he's super dangerous, but he just hasn't gotten there as a passer yet. To me, his development reminds me a little bit of Lamar. Lamar, his rookie season, his second year, he was not a great distributor of the football. He was dangerous with his legs. That's how he won MVP. But he has developed. He's improved his ability as a passer. I feel like Justin Fields is going to be on that same trajectory. His legs will allow him to stay on the field, be a really good starting quarterback, and his passing ability will come with time. We saw it plenty in college. I think he's a better passer than Lamar was in college, so I'm not super concerned, but I definitely think it's something you have to think about.
I agree that I would consider it, but in the end, I don't think I would go in that direction. I would, I really like Bryce Young as my QB1. I think he's going to be a really good quarterback in the league. And I have a higher grade on him than I did on Justin Fields when he came out. Not a big difference, but I still do. And I have some reservations as to Justin Fields' ability to be a star quarterback in this league because to me, I haven't seen the big step forward in his passing ability and his ability to process the field that I would want to see. I'm very glad for him that he learned that he's one of the most athletic players in the entire league and that he can really make an impact with his legs. And that's definitely buying him time in his development. And it's going to continue to be a really dangerous part of his game. But I think you need him to keep developing. The reason why I just wouldn't reset is that if you're looking at the state of this roster, I just don't know if this is a situation where you trade Justin Fields, you drop in Bryce Young, and you're gonna be good, and Bryce Young's gonna be are in the better half of NFL quarterbacks. I think highly of Bryce Young, but it's a questionable offensive line. Bryce Young is very small, and he's be throwing to really no receivers. And we've seen some of these quarterbacks that played on loaded offenses in college struggle to adjust to the NFL when the playing field is even, and in certain cases when they actually are on one of the worst teams. Trevor Lawrence was an example of that. Tua Tagovailoa, I think, was an example of that in the beginning, and I think that would happen to Bryce Young on a team like the Bears in the beginning. So there's no saying that year one Bryce Young would be better than year three Justin Fields. So I would stick with Justin Fields. He's been growing as a quarterback. Why not just fully invest in his development and trade down?
Yeah, I totally agree. I'd stick with Justin Fields and trade down. Before we get into the trade down conversation, let's talk really quickly about, maybe there's not a team that's willing to make that trade. I highly doubt that's the case. But if that was the case, what would you do? What do you think they're going to do at, one if they end up staying there?
Or alternatively, if they're just swapping 1 and 2 with the Texans, then they're really
Very
making
true.
the same decision.
Yep.
So, I think it's tough to tell whether they would take Anderson or Carter. I don't think they know yet, so it's kind of a guessing game. In the end, it's gonna end up who has the higher grade on their board, which I honestly cannot tell you that right now. That there's no way to know.
Yep, I am in the same boat. It's really pulling hairs. I think there's a couple things that we may have heard about Jalen Carter that we just kind of want to get some information cleared up upon. Maybe some, I don't want to say character concerns, but maybe some possible locker room concerns, maybe a work ethic thing here or there. I don't want to put anything out there that's not true. Just, read some things, heard some things from reliable reporters that I would like to get cleared up before I make my final decision on these guys. But I think both will be great players in the NFL.
I agree. And so on that note, I think the big thing for the Texans, I'm sorry, for the Bears, if they're trading down, is to stay in the top 4 to get either Will Anderson or Jalen Carter, because I don't think you can go wrong between them. I think they're both going to be Pro Bowl players. And I think it would just be, I've seen people floating the idea of trading down twice and then ending up in that 7 to 9 range where you've got the Raiders, the Falcons, the Panthers, who all could be looking to move up for a quarterback, or, just going down there in one fell swoop. But I think it would just be a shame when you're looking at the players that they potentially go with in that area. And I was trying to brainstorm who that would be. I think they could go a tackle like Paris Johnson or Peter Skoronsky, or pass rusher like Miles Murphy or Lucas Van Ness. And man, if you start at the first overall pick, not to say that those guys aren't going to be good NFL players, they're not your elite blue chip prospects that are going to be, absolute stars in this league. I don't think you can start at 1 and end up with one of those guys. That's a disappointment no matter what you end up getting to move down.
Yeah, it feels like a step down. Like you could both of those guys are worthy of the first overall pick. You could move down to 2, 3, or 4 and still get a guy worthy of the first overall pick while accumulating, probably an extra first rounder.
Yeah.
Especially if you're moving down to 4. So let's wrap up the conversation with the Bears about talking about some potential trade options for them and teams that would be looking to trade up to the first overall pick.
Yeah, I think that the clear candidate are the Indianapolis Colts. I see Ballard, the GM of the Colts, who's missed several times on veteran quarterbacks because the Colts have been good and they've been stuck towards the back of the draft order with no option to roll the dice with a Carson Wentz or a Phillip Rivers or a Matt Ryan. He finds himself 4th in the draft order. He's in striking distance of getting that first pick and finally being able to pick an elite quarterback prospect. I think he's going to do whatever it takes to be able to get his guy and finally put to bed the quarterback issues of the Colts. I think that he'll be the most aggressive among the possible trade candidates, and it makes sense for the Bears to be at 4, where presumably Colts go quarterback at 1, Texans go quarterback at 2, Cardinals go either Anderson or Carter, and at 4, the Bears would get Anderson or Carter.
Yeah, the Colts are in a really tough spot because Ballard doesn't seem like the guy that really wants to trade up if he doesn't have to. But in reality, he could, if he doesn't move up, he could be left with his 3rd quarterback on the board at pick number 4.
Yeah.
Because we assume the Bears are trading down, assume the Texans stay put. right? Maybe a team like the Raiders moves up to number one. The Colts are stuck at 4 with, possibly their third quarter. And, crazy things have happened in the NFL draft. We saw it 2 years ago. Quarterback went 1, 2, and 3. Maybe the Cardinals want to move out
Mhm.
after a quarterback goes 1 and 2. The Colts could end up getting leapfrogged again.
Yeah.
If I were the Colts, I would be super aggressive right now on calling the Bears constantly, trying to work out a trade as quickly as we can, because I feel like the longer you wait, the more you're going to have to pay for that pick.
And not to mention, if you've got the first overall pick, I think it makes you a little more attractive to free agents who know that, you're probably going to get, not that they follow college football that much, but that you're going to be able to get your pick of the quarterback prospects. It kind of puts to the doubt, lays aside the doubt of the quarterback position for Indy. So I think that's a good point.
I totally agree. Some other teams, I think, the Texans could end up flipping spots with the Bears. Not really sure the Bears would be too willing to do that because you're not really getting that much value from the Texans.
Mm-hmm.
But just, maybe the Texans give up a lot just to make sure they get their guy. I don't think the Bears would get another first round pick. And I think that's probably what they're looking for. But then the Raiders to me are an interesting team that could end up moving up to 1 potentially. I mean, they don't have a quarterback. Obviously, Derek Carr is now a free agent. Jarrett Stidham, not the quarterback of the future, but he's also a free agent, I'm pretty sure. So they're sitting at 7. Not sure the Bears would want to move down that far, but still a option of a team to look at that could move up to 1.
Yeah, I think that the Raiders, the Falcons, and the Panthers would all entertain that option. It's just a question of whether or not they have the draft ammo to convince the Bears to move that far down. On the topic of the Texans, I think they're staying put. I just feel like they're going to stay there. They're going to come out of this evaluation liking 2 quarterbacks, and I think that would be Young and Stroud, and I would do the same thing if I were the Texans. I would just stay put, whichever one is there. You take him, and I think that they can make the most of that. And that roster is not good. You got to keep your picks and fill it out because whoever that quarterback will be is going to need those players that you can obtain with the picks that you have outside of that second overall pick.
I agree. Yeah, I think I would be more surprised if they moved up than if they moved down. Maybe their guy gets taken at 1. They're, like we mentioned, they have a lot of needs. I'm not saying this is going to happen, but
I'd be shocked. I would be shocked. You can't move down for them. You got to get your quarterback of the future at 2.
But you don't want to force it. If you're not in love with any of the guys, you don't want to force it. I'm not saying that they will. I would be shocked if they move down also. I expect them to stay put. But I'm saying I would be more shocked to see them move up than move down just because of all the needs that they have.
That's understandable. So Arizona at 3. That's pretty clearly, they're going to be taking Anderson or Carter, and chances are with trade movement, they'll have their pick of the 2.
Yep. So, Cardinals pretty cut and dry. The best defensive player left on the board, like you mentioned. Colts, I think we kind of exhausted this. We expect to see them try to move up. And I really, if they can't move up, I still expect them to be taking a quarterback. I think they're honestly a fairly well-built roster for where they're picking. I think a good quarterback kind of puts them in that playoff contention, especially in the AFC South. Obviously, the Jaguars played really well this year. But other than that, not a whole lot in the AFC South. So, they definitely, with a good quarterback play, could be in the playoff contention.
Yeah, if I was them, I'd be moving up to 1, giving whatever you need to give and taking Bryce Young. And they've got a good lines, and which is an important thing for Young because you want to keep him protected. So now moving into kind of the second part of this top 10, where we're no longer talking, the top 4 is kind of feels like in some order, Young, Stroud, Carter, Anderson. And now we're getting into the 5th pick, the Seahawks, where I'm just assuming they're not going to go quarterback. Pete Carroll really likes what he's seen out of Geno Smith. He's at a point in his career where he probably doesn't want to work with a really raw young quarterback, which is what they'd be left with if Young and Stroud were gone. So I think that they're really just going to go best player available. And a guy that I like here and that we've seen mocked here by several analysts is Tyree Wilson.
Yeah, he was the guy that I put to them in my first mock in January. There were quite a few people in the comments that weren't big fans of that pick. And then we slowly kind of saw Tyree Wilson be a popular name to give to the Seahawks. And just to remind people, this is the Broncos pick. This is not the Seahawks pick.
Yeah.
The Seahawks were a good football team this year. And, there's another football team a little bit later on in this top 10 that also got a home run pick and really shouldn't be picking there. And that's the Eagles. But the Seahawks, I think they have a really solid roster as well. I think they probably go best player available. They do need some help on that defense. So an edge rusher like Tyree Wilson is probably where I think they go at the moment, unless, something crazy happens, 3 quarterbacks in the top 4, and either Carter or Anderson, falls to the Seahawks, which would just be great for Seahawks fans. And I don't think that's out of the question.
Yeah, that's possible. Yeah,
So
so
now I think we can
moving on to
move
the
on to
Lions at 6, I think the Lions, we've seen a lot of cornerbacks being mocked to them because they do really need one. I think it makes a lot of sense. I like Christian Gonzalez a lot here. If they were to go Devin Witherspoon or Joey Porter, that would make a good amount of sense too. I just want to say with the Lions and with the Seahawks, I'd watch out for potentially a quarterback trade where getting into this next year of quarterbacks, namely Will Levis and Anthony Richardson, the Raiders, the Falcons, and the Panthers are all lined up 7, 8, and 9 with big quarterback needs. They could be looking to jump each other, and the Seahawks and Lions could be the beneficiaries of that. Again, assuming the Lions, like the Seahawks, won't be taking one because Jared Goff had a solid year, and it just doesn't feel like they're going to be drafting one.
Yeah, it's really interesting because both the Seahawks and the Lions have solid quarterbacks, but fairly unproven if you really think about it. Geno Smith was pretty much a career backup. He had one great season with the Seahawks, and Jared Goff, he was good with the Rams, but never really could take that next step. He might have been helped by his surrounding talent, and then with the Lions this year, a really good year. Would you be shocked to see either of those teams take quarterbacks? I know I'm not expecting it. You're not expecting it, but I wouldn't be shocked if they surprised us and they're like, well, especially a guy like Anthony Richardson, we'll let him sit for 1 or 2 years and then, let him go on as our quarterback of the future. So I don't think it's going to happen, but it is, something in the back of my mind that, wouldn't be crazy if either of these teams general managers fall in love with a guy like Richardson or Levis.
I agree with you. I wouldn't be shocked. I think it's more so with the Lions than the Seahawks. I could see it. If it was me, I really see Young and Stroud as pro ready. You can start them in year 1. They've got a good shot to be franchise quarterbacks, whereas Richardson is a project. I think Levis might be even more of a project. I do have Richardson over Levis, even though a lot of people have them flipped in the other order. So for me, I would even entertain moving up for Stroud or Young if I was those teams, because Geno Smith and Jared Goff are just really not long-term options. At the end of the day, you're probably going to get outbid by some of these teams that need quarterbacks even more. So chances are they stay put. If by some miracle CJ Stroud is there, absolutely pull the trigger, but I doubt it's going to be the case. So probably would end up going with a position player with the Seahawks and Lions here.
And now getting to what we mentioned is that second tier of quarterback needy teams at number 7, the Raiders.
Yep.
I think quarterback's really the biggest need for them. We mentioned before they could be a team that are looking to move up. If I were the Raiders, I would be looking to move up. Probably, that 5 spot with the Seahawks would make sense. Obviously, that's a trade you make on draft day. But, I'm looking – you need a quarterback if you're the Raiders. And, yeah, Levis and Richardson probably aren't ready year 1. But I think they both have talent. And if you can re-sign Stidham, let him start the year, kind of take this as, the year that it's going to be, let one of those guys develop and maybe move on with them in year 2. I think that would be a decent option for them, just because, Josh McDaniels doesn't have all the time in the world. But I think if he drafts a quarterback, he can say, hey, look, we need him to develop a year. We're going to take this year for what it is. And then in, what would that be, 2024, we'll be ready to go.
Yeah, I think the Raiders will pick a quarterback. I could see Will Levis being the pick here, and not even really with the intention of sitting him a whole year, just kind of part of a year, and then thinking, we've got Josh Jacobs, we've got Devontae Adams, we have absolute playmakers that can elevate a rookie quarterback, which a lot of teams picking in this top 10 don't have to the same degree. Darren Waller's another guy. So I could see them going that route. I'm just going to preface these next three picks, the Raiders, the Falcons, and the Panthers, by saying that I wouldn't pick a quarterback if I was any of them. I would really just do everything I can to move up for younger Stroud. But otherwise, I'm just not comfortable taking Richardson or Levis in the top 10. They're just too risky. They're too raw. Richardson's a late round one guy that I would take a shot on because he's got all the traits. Levis, I have some concerns because to me, over a couple of years of starting, I still don't see him anticipating. He waits for the receiver to get to the spot and then he throws. And that's just, you're going to get killed in the NFL if you do that. And I'm not saying that he can't improve that, but a lot of the reasons for his insufficient play that have been given, such as his injuries or a poor supporting cast, poor offensive scheme, I understand how those held him back, but I'm just still concerned by some of the ways in which he failed to process the field, both in terms of anticipating, in terms of sensing the pressure, etc. So that's just what I want to say on. I wouldn't be going quarterback here, but I fully expect the Raiders would. And on what I would do, I would be going tackle probably, maybe even sliding back a few spots because I think between Broderick Jones, Peter Skronsky, DeJuan Jones, and the fourth one, who's the fourth one I'm missing? Well, I can't get it off the top of my head. I know there's a fourth guy in that tier, but that's what I would be doing if I was the Raiders.
Yeah, I think tackle would make a lot of sense. That offensive line was, I think, really solid a couple of years ago. It's starting to fall off a little bit. The guys have aged. Moving on to the Falcons. The Falcons are a little interesting to me. Like you mentioned, they're definitely a team that could be looking quarterback. They did draft Desmond Ridder last year, and they did let him start a couple games. I don't think he did anything that would make me think he's the quarterback of the future. I didn't see him as a quarterback of the future, coming out in the draft. But I feel like they might be a team that a lot of people think is going to go quarterback and they don't. If I were the Falcons, I wouldn't. I think that, you do have Ridder. You drafted him for a reason. Although I don't believe in him, I think you can continue to build that team up around Ridder at the moment. If he shows that he can be the quarterback of the future, great. If not, I think you can have a really solid team and a really good offense that you can end up dropping a quarterback into maybe in a year or two. And then that quarterback that, they end up taking in the future will kind of be ready to go and be carried as a rookie and then, become what he can be in the future.
Yeah, it just feels like the Falcons don't have that urgency to draft a quarterback or really get a good quarterback, but I'm confused as to why. Because Arthur Smith, I would imagine, doesn't have unlimited job security, and I certainly think he's a good coach because that team has been winning more games than they should have the last 2 years. But at some point, you got to be thinking, with an old Matt Ryan last year, with Marcus Mariota this year, with an potentially an unknown in Desmond Ridder next year, you don't have that many chances at being an NFL head coach. At one point, I'd think they'd get aggressive and get a guy that Arthur Smith loves. But I agree that I could see them being the odd team out because if we just, take a stab at predicting where these top four quarterbacks are going to go here, and that will tie in with, our analysis of the Panthers pick, because I think the Panthers are going to be really aggressive. David Tepper really likes to have a say in all this. They didn't go quarterback last year and the year before when they were rumored to love Justin Fields and Mac Jones, didn't go for either of them. I ended up sticking with Sam Darnold. I think the Panthers are coming out of this draft with one of these quarterbacks. So if I were to guess, Colts move up to 1. They grab Bryce Young. At 2, the Texans take CJ Stroud. I'll go with the Panthers moving up with the Seahawks at 5 and taking, let's say, Will Levis. And at 7, the Raiders go Anthony Richardson, and there's nobody left at 8. So that's why I think Atlanta could end up going with a tackle or an edge rusher with some of those guys that I mentioned before.
Yeah, I agree with those 4 teams that, you projected the quarterback to. It really does surprise me a little bit that Arthur Smith doesn't have that urgency. Because, like you mentioned, I also think he's a great coach. They really don't have a good team, if we're being honest. They really lack talent in a lot of areas. But they were, what were they, 7-10 this year, 8 and
About that,
9. And I mean, they should have been a bottom 4 team in the
yeah.
NFL with the roster that you look at. Um, so maybe Arthur Blank kind of sees what's going on as well, and maybe he's given Arthur Smith the vote of confidence and said, like,
Take your
I think
time.
you're doing a good job. I don't want to force a quarterback either. He seems like a fairly smart owner that doesn't want to kind of get too involved in the football business. So I think if Arthur Smith can say, hey, look, we're kind of in a tough spot with the draft. I don't want to force a quarterback, so we're just going to continue to build the team up around him. I wouldn't be shocked if Arthur Blank is okay with that and saying, all right, as long as the team continues to improve and then eventually we get in a spot where we feel comfortable, maybe making a trade up to the top of the draft to drop a quarterback in. I kind of think, to me, that's kind of where I feel the Falcons are at right now. So I agree. No quarterback at 8 for the Falcons. I think they just end up going best player available, whether that's a edge rusher, maybe a cornerback. If a guy like Christian Gonzalez is still there, that would make some sense to me. And I think rounding out the last 2 picks in the top 10, Panthers, we expect them to go quarterback. Yeah. Like you mentioned, David Tepper seems like he's really, every year he's trying to get a quarterback. And I think they're done making a trade for a failed first-round pick. I think Tepper's just going to be like, do whatever you have to do. Go get my guy. We've heard that Tepper really likes Levis. Not sure, how much that's going to play into what they do, but I think one way or another, they're coming out of this first round with a quarterback.
I agree with that. And now I think we can move on to the 10th pick, which I think is really interesting because it's the Philadelphia Eagles. And they were the Super Bowl runner-up. And what do they do to try to get over that hump and get back to the big game, which is so difficult? My first question is there any chance Miles Sanders walks in free agency and they go Bijan Robinson here?
I think that would be a really interesting pick for the Eagles. I think it would make a lot of sense. I don't think they do it. Jeffrey Lurie, we know he has specific positions that he values, which is the big boys offensive line, defensive line. We know it is not cornerback and running back. They continually pass on those 2 positions. Linebacker also. They do not really draft linebackers highly in the draft as well. Could he switch it up? Yes. But does Bijan Robinson give them what they need to get over the hump? Because they have a great running game.
They have a great running game, but they've been doing it. Miles Sanders is solid, but not spectacular. And it still looks really good when it's Kenneth Gainwell and Boston Scott, who are really mediocre NFL running backs. Imagine what that rushing offense would be like with Bijan Robinson. I think that Nick Sirianni has earned a real say in this pick with just how good of a coach he's been through 2 years, bringing them to the Super Bowl. And the Philly head coaches do usually have a say, so I would watch out for it. I would just watch out for it, and because I think it would be really interesting. And boy, that offense would be scary with Jalen Hurts throwing to AJ Brown and Devontae Smith. You've got Bijan Robinson, who's just an absolute incredible at running back prospect. The only question is how high does he go because of the devaluation of the running back position. So you add him behind with the scheme that's just so special from a running standpoint that Sirianni runs. I think it would be interesting. If not, I think there are other places they could go. Cornerback's one option. But if Gonzalez is off the board, maybe they're going Joey Porter or Devin Witherspoon. Those would be solid picks as well. I'm just really enthralled by the possibility of Bijan Robinson.
Yeah, I think, I mocked him there in my first mock. I don't think he goes 10 just because of the way the running back position has been devalued. Um, I think there might be a lot of people that say, you know what, the Eagles don't have a lot of needs. Maybe they trade out. I don't think they trade out because they were so close
Yeah.
this year to winning the Super Bowl. I think they realize they're really one or two players away that can make a big impact. And I think you can get a big impact player at pick 10. I think they go cornerback. I think Gonzalez will probably be gone. I think so. I think they either go with Witherspoon or Joey Porter Jr. Gonzalez if he's there. But to me, that kind of seemed like their biggest weakness in the Super Bowl. And I think that's going to sit with, both Howie Roseman and Nick Sirianni. And I think they're going to look at the Super Bowl when they eventually rewatch the tape and say, if we had a better cornerback, we probably could have stopped the Chiefs on some drives in the second half and won the Super Bowl. So I think that's going to sit with them. I just think they go corner and say, let's run it back. Same team we have, better corners. Let's go for the Super Bowl this year.
Yeah, and James Bradbury, who committed that holding call that cost them the Super Bowl, is a free agent, and I just don't see him being back in Philadelphia after that. So
I don't
corner definitely makes a lot of sense. I would love to see Beach on there. It'd be really interesting.
It would be a lot of fun.
As you can tell from this discussion, this top 10 is really just dominated by quarterback questions, and it's going to be fun to see how it all shakes out because unlike last year where no quarterbacks were really being talked about being in the top 10, we're back to kind of the norm in the NFL draft in that what will dominate the discussion are quarterbacks. And it's going to be fun this year because it's going to be one of those years like, that Goff Wentz 2016 year where teams are going to be trading up. And so I'm excited to see it unfold.
Yeah. Before we go, what do you think is the haul that the Texans get? Do you think it's 1 first-round pick, 2 first-round picks? What do you think?
Well, let's hypothetically, let's say it's the Colts. I think they get a first and a third.
Plus 4. So
yes,
2 firsts and a third.
Yeah,
I agree. I agree. 2 firsts and a third. Honestly, I think you could end up seeing more just because I think, in my opinion, you're going to have the Colts, the Raiders, and the Panthers all calling the Texans. I think they're going to outbid each other. I don't think the Colts will end up giving up 3 firsts. I think that's too rich. I could see 2 firsts and a second, though. I think that is entirely possible. That would be pick 35, I think.
Yeah.
The Colts are in round 2. I could see 4, 35 in next year's first from the Colts.
Yeah, that's possible. I think one last question. What's the timetable for trading the first pick? Is this something that we're expecting to see imminently or perhaps at the combine, or is this something that's going to happen, pushing into the final weeks of the draft process?
I think it's going to happen fairly early. I think in the past when these top of the draft trades have happened, I've always felt like it's happened earlier than I expected. Even when the 49ers moved up to 3 a couple of years ago and made that trade with the Dolphins, it happened like kind of out of the blue, still with a month and a half left before the draft, if I remember correctly. I think this happens 2 weeks after the combine.
Yeah, I would agree. I would agree.
Mid-March. I think that's when it's going to happen.
I could see it happening right after the combine, honestly. If the Bears will have the time there to talk to everyone, to get their offers and to tell everyone, we want to know what our draft is looking like heading into free agency. Submit your best offers. We're going to be making that decision. Obviously, there could be a little delay because these things aren't that easy, and it goes into a couple weeks after the combine. But I would agree that relatively soon post-combine is when we could be seeing this.
Yeah, I agree. I think anytime before free agency, so the Texans know, but also so the other teams know.
Yeah.
Right, if you're the Raiders, you might be looking at a free agent quarterback. Maybe the Raiders aren't the best option because they just cut Derek Carr. The Panthers, for example, they might be looking at free agent quarterbacks like Derek Carr. If they can move up to 1, then they don't have to worry about it.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'll say with 99% certainty this happens before free agency starts. I think, 2 weeks after the combine, maybe immediately after.
Okay. Yeah, so it's going to be fun. I'm excited to see it go down. And, thank you everyone for listening. It's, the Super Bowl's behind us. And so we are officially into draft season, welcoming everyone who's, just joined aboard or the people that are yet to. And, with the NFL Combine coming up, I'm sure there'll be a lot of draft talk in the mainstream NFL world. So enjoy it. This is one of the best times in the NFL calendar, for us, even if there's no football, it's draft season. And, let's bring it with all this quarterback movement. It's exciting.
All right, we'll be back with another episode soon.